Well, Casey, I have stared into the orb, and the orb stared back. And I want to tell you about a very fun, very strange field trip I took last night to an event hosted by World, the company formerly known as
I
WorldCoin.
am very excited to hear about this. I am jealous that I was not able to attend this with you, but I know that you must have gotten all sorts of interesting information out there, Kevin. So let's talk about what's going on with World and its orbs. And maybe for people who haven't been following the story all along, give us a reminder about what World is.
Yeah, so we talked about this actually when it launched a few years ago on the show. And it is this sort of audacious and I would say like crazy sounding scheme that this startup world has come up with. This is a startup that was co founded by Sam Altman. This is sort of like one of his side projects. And the way that it started was basically an attempt to solve what is called proof of humanity. Basically, in a world with very powerful and convincing AI chatbots swarming all over the internet, how are we going to be able to prove to fellow humans that we are, in fact, a human and not a chatbot? If we're on a website with them or on a dating app or doing some kind of financial transaction, what is the actual proof that we could give them to verify that we're a
Right.
human?
And one question that might immediately come to mind for people, Kevin, is well, what about our government issued identification? Don't we already have systems in place that let us flash a driver's license to let people know that we're a human?
Yeah, so there are government issued IDs, but there are some problems with them. For one, they can be faked. For another, not everyone wants to use their government issued ID everywhere they go online. And there's also this issue of coordination between governments, and it's actually not trivially easy to like get a system set up to be able to accept any ID from any place in the world. And so along comes WorldCoin, and they have this scheme whereby they are going to ask everyone in the world to scan their eyeballs into something called the orb.
Mhm.
And the orb is a piece of hardware. It's got a bunch of fancy cameras and sensors in it. It is, at least in its first incarnation, somewhere between the size of like a
Bigger than a human head or smaller?
I would say it's like a small human's
Okay.
head in size. Like if you can picture like a kid's soccer ball, it's like one of those
Hmm.
sizes. And basically, the way it works is you scan your eyes into this orb, and it takes a print or a scan of your irises, and then it turns that into a unique cryptographic signature, a digital ID that is tied not to your government ID or even to your name, but to your individual and unique iris. And then once you have that, you can use your so-called world ID to do things like log into websites or to verify that you are a human on a dating app or a social network. And critically, the way that they are getting people to sign up for this is by offering them WorldCoin, which is their cryptocurrency that, as of last night, with the sort of bonus that you got for scanning your eyes into the orb was something like $40 worth of this WorldCoin cryptocurrency token.
Got it. And we're going to get into what was announced last night. But before we do that, Kevin, in case anyone is listening thinking, I don't know about this, guys. This just sounds like another kooky Silicon Valley scheme. Could this possibly matter in my life at all? What is your case that what World is working on actually matters?
I mean, I want to say that I think those things are not mutually
Yeah.
exclusive. Like, it can be possible that this is a kooky Silicon Valley scheme and that it is potentially addressing an important problem. I mean, think about the study we just talked about where researchers unleashed a bunch of AI chatbots onto Reddit to have like conversations with people without labeling themselves as AI
Yep.
bots. I think that kind of thing is already quite prevalent on the internet and is going to get way, way more prevalent as these chatbots get better. And so I actually do think that as AI gets more powerful and ubiquitous, we are going to want some way to like easily verify or confirm that the person we're talking with or gaming with or flirting with on a dating app is actually a real human. That's the sort of near term case. And as far out as that sounds, that is actually only step one in World's plan for global domination. Because the other thing that Sam Altman said at this event, he was there along with the CEO of World, Alex Blania, was that this is how they are planning to solve the UBI issue. Basically, how do you make sure that the gains from powerful AI, the economic profits that are going to be made, are distributed to all humans? And so their sort of long-term idea is that if you give everyone these unique cryptographic world IDs by scanning them into the orbs, you can then use that to like distribute some kind of basic income to them in the future in the form of WorldCoin. So I should say, like, that is very far away, in my opinion, but I think that is where they are headed with this.
Yeah,
thing. But,
and I have to note, we already had a technology for distributing sums of money to citizens, which is called the government. But it seems like in the world conception of society, that maybe that doesn't exist anymore. So let's get to what happened last night, Kevin. It's Wednesday evening in San Francisco. Where did you go? Set the scene for us.
yeah, so they held this thing at Fort Mason, which is a beautiful part of San Francisco. And you go in and, there's music. It sort of feels like, there's like lights going off. It sort of feels like you're in a nightclub in Berlin or something. And then at a certain point, they have their keynote where Sam Altman and Alex Blania get on stage and they show off all the progress they've been making. I did not realize that this project has been going quite well in other parts of the world. They now have something like 12 million unique people who have like scanned their irises into these orbs, but they have not yet launched in the United States because for the longest time, there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty about whether you could do something like WorldCoin, both because of the biometric data collection that they're doing and because of the crypto piece. But now that the Trump administration has taken power and has basically signaled like anything goes when it comes to crypto, they are now going to be launching in the US. So they are opening up a bunch of retail outlets in cities like San Francisco, LA, Nashville, Austin, where you are going to be able to go and scan into the orb and get your world ID. They have plans to put something like 7,500 orbs across the United States by the end of the year. So they are expanding very quickly. They also announced a bunch of other stuff. They have some interesting partnerships. One of them is with Razer, the gaming company, which is basically going to allow you to prove that you are a human when you're playing some online game. Also, a partnership with Match, the dating app company that makes Tinder and Hinge and other apps. You're going to be able soon to log into Tinder in Japan using your World ID. And there's a bunch of other stuff. They have like a new Visa credit card that will allow you to spend your World coin and stuff like that. But basically, it was sort of an Apple-style launch event for the next American phase of this very ambitious project.
I'm trying to understand, if you're on Japanese Tinder and, maybe someday soon there's a feed of orb verified humans that you can sort of select from, do they seem more or less attractive to you because they've been orb verified? To me, that's a coin flip. I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, what was funny was at this event last night, they had brought in like a bunch of sort of like social media influencers to like
Orb
make
influencers
videos and yes, they brought in the Orbfluencers. And so they had like all these like very well-dressed, attractive people like taking selfies of themselves, like posing with the orbs. And like I think there's a chance that this becomes like a status thing. Like, have you orbed becomes like a kind of like have you ridden in a Waymo, but for like 2025.
Yeah, maybe. I'm also thinking about the sort of like conspiracy theorists who think that like the social security numbers the US government gives you is the mark of the beast. Like I can't imagine those people are going to get orb verified any soon. But speaking of orbs, Kevin, am I right that among the announcements this week is that World has a new orb?
Yes, new orb just dropped. They announced last night that they are starting to produce this thing called the Orb Mini, which is, we should say it, not an orb.
What?
It is a
I'm out.
It is like it's like a little sort of smartphone sized device that has like two glowing eyes on it basically, and you can or will be able to like use that to verify your humanity instead of the actual orb. So the idea is distribute a bunch of these things. People can like convince their friends to sign up and get their world IDs, and that's part of how they're gonna scale this thing.
For me, all this company has going for it is that it makes an orb that scans your eyeballs. So if we're already moving to a flat rectangle, I'm like 80% less interested. But we'll see how it goes, I guess. Now, okay, so you had a chance, Kevin, to scan your eyeballs. What did you decide to do in the end?
Yes, I became orb pilled. I stared into the orb. Basically, it feels like you're setting up Face ID on your iPhone.
Okay.
It's like, look here, move back a little bit, take off your glasses, like make sure we can get a
Give
good
us a smile,
image.
wink.
Right. Right. Say, I pledge allegiance to WorldCoin 3 times. A little louder, please. And then it sort of glows and makes a sound, and I now have my world ID and I apparently like $40 worth of WorldCoin, although I have no idea how to access
Was
it.
there any physical pain from the orb scan? How'd you feel when you woke up this morning?
No.
Any joint pain?
Well, I did find that my dreams were invaded by orbs. I did dream of orbs. So it's made it into my deep psyche in some way.
Yeah, that's a well-known side effect. Now, you say you were given some amount of world coin as part of this experience. Will you be donating that to charity?
If I can figure out how, yes. And we should talk about this because the WorldCoin cryptocurrency has not been doing well.
No?
And like over the past year, it's down more than 70%. This was initially a big reason that people wanted to go get their orb scans, is because they would get this like airdrop of crypto tokens that could be worth something. And I think this is the part that makes me the most skeptical of this whole project. Like, I think I am in general pretty open-minded about this idea because I do think that bots and impersonation is going to be a real problem. But I feel like we went through this a couple years ago when like all these crypto things were launching that would promise to like use crypto as the incentive to like get these big, projects off the ground. And, I wrote about one of them. It was called Helium. And I thought that was like a decent idea at the time. But it turned out that like attaching crypto to it just like ruined the whole thing because it created all these like awful incentives and brought in all these like scammers and people who were not scrupulous actors into the ecosystem. And I worry that that is the piece of this that is going to if it fails, like cause the failure.
Well, I'll tell you what I would do if I were them, which is to become the president of the United States, because then you can have your own coin. Foreign governments can buy vast amounts of it to curry favor with you. You don't have to disclose that, and then the price goes way up. So something for them to look into, I would say.
It's true. It's true. And we should also mention that there are places that are already starting to ban this technology, or at least to take a hard look at it. So WorldCoin has been banned in Hong Kong. Regulators in Brazil also not big fans of it. And then there are places in the United States, like New York State, where you can't do this because of a privacy law that prevents the collection of some kinds of biometric data. So I think it's sort of a race between World and WorldCoin and regulators to like see who can, like whether the scale can arrive before the regulations.
Well, so let's talk a bit about the privacy piece, because on one hand, you are giving your biometric data to a private entity, and they can then sort of do many things with it, some of which you may not like. On the other hand, they're trying to sell the idea that this is much more privacy protecting than something like a driver's license that might have your picture on it, right? So, Kevin, can you sort of walk me through the privacy arguments for and against what World is trying to do here?
Yeah, so they had a whole spiel about this at this event. Basically, they've done a lot of things to try to protect your biometric data. One of them is like they don't actually store the like scan of your iris, they just hash it, and the hash is stored locally on your device and doesn't like go into some giant database somewhere. But I do think like this is the part where a lot of people in the US are going to kind of fall off the bandwagon or maybe be more skeptical of this idea is like it just feels creepy to upload your biometric data to a private company, one that is not like, associated with the government or any other entity that you might inherently trust more. And I think the bull case for this is something like what happened with like Clear at the airport, right? I remember when Clear and TSA PreCheck were launching, it was kind of like creepy and weird, and you would only do it if you were like not that concerned about privacy. And it was like, oh, I'm just gonna like upload my fingerprints and my face scan to this thing that I don't know how it's being used. And then over time, like a lot of people started to care less about the privacy thing and sort of get on board because it would let them get through the airport faster. I think that's one possible outcome here is that we start just like seeing these orbs in like every gas station and convenience store in America. And then we just sort of become desensitized to it. And it's like, oh yeah, like I did my orb. Have you not done your orb? I think the other thing that could happen is like this just is a bridge too far for people, and they just say, you know what, I don't trust these people, and I don't want to give them my eyeballs.
Yeah. Let me ask one more question about the financial system undergirding world, Kevin, which is I just learned in preparing for this conversation with you that World is apparently a nonprofit. Is that right?
So it's a little complicated. Basically, there is a for-profit company called Tools for Humanity that is sort of putting all of this together. They're in charge of the whole sort of scheme. And then there is the World Foundation, which is a nonprofit that owns the intellectual property of the sort of protocol on which all of this is based. So as with many Sam Altman projects, the answer is it's complicated. I think here's where this gets really interesting to me, Casey. So Sam Altman, co-founder of World, also CEO of OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI is reportedly thinking about starting a social network.
Mm-hmm.
One possibility I can see quite easily, actually, is that these things eventually merge. That World IDs become sort of the means of logging into the OpenAI social network, whatever that ends up looking like. And maybe it becomes the way that people will pay for things within the kind of OpenAI ecosystem. Maybe it becomes the currency that you get rewarded in for contributing some valuable content or piece of information to the OpenAI network. I think there are a lot of different possible paths here, including, by the way, like failure. I think that is obviously an option here. But one path is that this sort of becomes either officially or unofficially merged, and that WorldCoin becomes some piece of like the OpenAI ChatGPT ecosystem.
Sure. Or here's another possibility. Sam has to raise so much money to spread World throughout the world that he decides that it will actually be necessary to convert the nonprofit into a for-profit. Could you imagine that, Kevin?
That would never happen.
No, you don't think that could ever happen?
No. There's no precedent for that.
Let me ask one more question about Sam Altman. I think some observers may feel like that this is essentially Sam causing one kind of problem with OpenAI and then trying to sell you a solution with World, right? OpenAI creates the problem of, well, we can't trust anything in the media or online anymore. And then World comes along and says, hey, all you gotta do is give me your eyeball and I'll solve that problem for you. So is that like a fair reading of what's happening here?
Potentially, yeah. I've heard it compared to like the arsonist also being the firefighter, and I don't think it's a problem that OpenAI single-handedly is causing. I think we were moving in the direction of like very compelling AI bots anyway. I think they are basically trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? OpenAI is going to make the software that allows people to build these very powerful AI bots and spread them all over the internet. And then World and WorldCoin will be there on the other side to say, hey, don't you want to be able to prove that you're a human?
Yeah.
So I gotta say, if it works out for them, like this is sort of like total domination. Like they will have conquered the world of AI. They will have conquered the world of finance and human verification, and basically all reputable commerce will have to go through them. I don't think that's probably going to be the outcome here, but there was definitely a moment where I was sitting in the press conference hearing about like the one world money with like the decentralized one world governance scheme that's like started by the guy with the AI company that's making all the chatbots to bring us to AGI. And I just had this sort of like moment of like, the future's so weird. It's so weird. It's so weird. It was also like one of those moments I feel like living in San Francisco, I don't know if you identify with this, but you just sort of become desensitized to weird things.
Yes.
Like somebody tells you at a party that they're like resurrecting the woolly mammoth and you're like, cool. You know? like that's great. Good for you.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot to actually give me the sense that like I'm seeing something new and strange. But I got it at the World Orb event last night.
No, I have a friend who once just casually mentioned to me that his roommate was trying to make dogs immortal. And I was like, yeah, well, welcome to another Saturday in the big city. So, Kevin, I have to say, as we sort of bring this to a close, I feel torn about this because I think I would benefit from a world where I knew who online was a person and who was not. I think I remain skeptical that eyeball scans are the way to get there. I think for the moment, while I mostly enjoy being an early adopter, I'm going to be sitting out the eyeball scanning process. But do you have a case that I should change my mind and jump on the bandwagon any earlier?
No, I am not here to tell you that you need to get your orb scan. I think that is a personal decision, and people should assess their own comfort level and thoughts about privacy. And I'm somewhat cavalier about this stuff because I'll try anything for a good story. But I think for most people, they should really dig into the claims that World and WorldCoin are making and figure out whether that's something they're comfortable with. I would say my overall impression is that I am convinced that World and WorldCoin have identified a real problem, but not that they have come up with the perfect solution. I do actually think we're going to need something like a proof of humanity system. I'm just not convinced that the orbs and the crypto and the scanning and the logins, I'm just not convinced that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. And my personal hope is that actual governments investigate the concept of digital identity. I mean, some countries are exploring this, but I would like to see a really robust international alliance that is taking a hard look at this question and is doing it in some sort of democratically governed way.
Yeah, sounds like a great job for Doge. Would you like to scan into the Doge orb, Casey?
Yeah, I'll see if I can get them to return my emails. They're not really known for their responsiveness. I will say this: if what World had said this week, instead of we've shrunken the next version of this thing down to a rectangle, they'd committed that every successive orb would be larger than the last, then I would actually scan my eyeball. If I could get my eyeball scanned by an orb the size of a room, okay, now we've got something happening. Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.